You're listening to the Middlemen Podcast with me, Tom Lemongello, and my co-host Todd Zawicki. Our careers have put us in the middle between retail, media, and brands. But retail media is a closed loop, so we're here to open up the channel and let you listen in. Join our discussions with the people who make retail media happen. Hey Todd, we are ready to talk about GroceryTV.
The ill-named GroceryTV, for the record, and we talk about this in the conversation, which is, it is not just grocery TV.
Sometimes you hit on something, you hit on that bowling pin that went down first and you go all in on it. I think that also speaks to the fact that they've been around a while. This is not just a tiny startup. And they've been through a bit of a hype cycle in technology. They started, and this was what you always talk about with me, is I always want to go straight for the best technology and to try to ID people, track them as best as possible. But that really, in this discussion that we're going to have with Marlow, that was something they had to pivot away from.
The best technology or the best ideas aren't always what the market's ready for. And what's fascinating to me is the story of in-store. We're post-early hype, which means the companies who've been in it, we've talked about Cusick, we've got GroceryTV, have been in it for a while. Their technologies are mature, the products are mature, they work. And we're at a point now where, is the market ready to take off? What's going to be the catalyzing event for in-store? Off-site was first. I think on-site kicked off, as you've talked about, Tom, with the pandemic. And then now it's the question of in-store. And what's fascinating to me is, I walked into Best Buy recently. They adopted in-store early, like almost too early, 10 years ago, and have kind of backed away from it. And they have a store that you would think would be ideal for in-store. Text, screens, a layout that allows you to visualize across the store, and yet nothing.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. GroceryTV, the reason this company is successful is from partnering with grocers, not electronics retailers, which would have been the easier one because they had screens all over their stores already. So that's crazy in and of itself. But the other part of it, I think, the fact that it's called GroceryTV brings up a distinction in the way that retail media has played out. And that is what you're talking about, the progression of offsite, onsite, in-store is very true for tier 2 retailers. Tier 1 retailers like Walmart basically started with on-site only and then are now starting to figure out off-site. And then eventually, hopefully, they will get to in-store. For tier 2 and down, because they didn't have as much on-site traffic, it was all off-site and it was super easy to do off-site. And then on-site happened, as you said, during the pandemic, and that really accelerated. And now they, to differentiate themselves, are starting to do in-store, and Marlow will start to talk about how Hy-Vee is doing this really all over their store. So from that perspective, that distinction is important to understand, because otherwise you think offsite is something new, but it's been around. And when we were at Quotient, it was so easy to do, it was almost impossible to sell anything else.
I'm looking forward to the rise of in-store because it is something truly unique to physical retailers, and it is differentiatable. And it will never be a commodity. And I think that's important. And so if I'm selling something, the more unique it is, hopefully the easier it is. And given the tech works and some of the new ideas, like screens are cheap, pending tariffs, are as cheap as ever. The new technologies for screens like e-ink make the ability to deploy interesting screens fascinating. And it's not about, to exactly your point, it's not about cool tracking, whatever else. It's about creating a cool environment. And how do you present messaging to consumers? And what's fascinating is, I think the pandemic raised the question of, is everything going to move to a digital environment? And the reality is no. We do enjoy physical spaces. We do enjoy physical experiences. We do enjoy in-person experiences. And as a result, there's going to be opportunities to market in those environments. I saw something over the weekend talking about how Barnes & Noble has survive and now beginning to thrive as they create more of a third place environment. And that kind of speaks to that. It speaks to wanting an in-person environment, an IRL experience. I don't think digital out of home, I think, is actually more secondary. I think retail is just going to be the better platform and better mechanism to do in-person real world marketing. It's such a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see it play out.
Just to bolster your point, the reason that digital out of home became an ad tech sort of buzzword for retail media earlier than in store was because it was easier. It was oh, you can put whatever ads on here, and there's no worry that the store is going to be wondering how to curate what's happening outside of their doors. When you bring it in and you put it on their Iron Man, if you put the wrong ad there, that's a problem.
Fascinating things to think about. And I think what's interesting, you talk to whether it's Marlow, GroceryTV, or others, is you can just, they ooze experience.
Yeah.
And real world understanding of this real world problem or opportunity. Actually, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. And so I think that's the experience they've had over building this company over the last decade plus really is comforting, because they know what they're doing. There's a ton of experience there, and you can see why they're growing. And again, them and others as well. And so since they're delivering a good product, they're in a good position to help make this third pillar of retail media, I think, finally grow and take off. And I do think you're right. Tier 2 media is embracing it. They're going to be the experimentalists. The big guys have more concern. And as this evolves, we're going to see some interesting things in the next couple of years. Again, I think this is where the innovation is going to be, is in store. And I know, again, your own personal retail media experience going back a decade plus speaks to, when I see your eyeballs get excited about something, it is almost exclusively in-store related.
And you'll hear this from Marlow, the CEO of GroceryTV, where, you can hear in his voice, it's like, yeah, offsite's the easy thing. We're trying to do the next thing. And to his credit, he is doing it in a way that's not going to freak out ad buyers. He's not overdoing the technology, but he is trying to build out a new channel that hasn't existed before. And you can't just use the easy button, and you can't just push the ad budget into offsite and wash your hands of it. You have to really think about the way you're doing it, where you're placing it, how you're measuring it. So let's get into discussion with Marlow Nickell, CEO of GroceryTV. So tell me how it started then. What was the original business?
Yeah. Original business was just this general observation that you've got a pretty incredible captive audience in the in-store environment, right? If you're in the checkout aisle, average dwell time there is 4.5 minutes. Plus, it's an area that's visible to the whole rest of the store, mid-journey in the shopping experience. And then beyond that, things like entrance, everybody's got to go buy it. And there's just all these other parts of the store that are interesting to be able to reach shoppers. And so really that original observation was just, this is an amazing way to get in front of communities across the country. And if we could put digital signage there, we could do a lot of the traditional kind of marketing that's always been done there, but do it in a way that's scalable, that national brands can access programmatically just like they do any other digital platform. In a nutshell, we really are just trying to bring the same capabilities that you have for on-site retail media to the in-store environment where, let's be honest, like most of the transactions actually happen.
So when we were talking earlier, when you first started, you were really on the bleeding edge of anything that you could do in store. You talked about front-facing cameras and tracking people. So tell me what that story, I think, is interesting.
Yeah, so that's where I probably brought a bit too much of the technology side to the business, and we tried to do a few too many things at once at the beginning. We even had things like tracking out-of-stock products and planogram compliance and all kinds of things beyond advertising. We've learned the hard lesson that you need to be a little more focused in a company. And so one that I think you're referring to is we used to do actually impression and engagement measurements, so we could actually see when someone was in front of the screen and whether they were looking at the creative or not, how long they were looking at it. So we could say, like, here's exactly how many impressions have been served and how engaging your creative is relative to other creatives. And that was really cool stuff, but the reality is the market wasn't ready for that from a demand standpoint. And there's also just a lot of challenges from a scalability standpoint and a legal standpoint. And so we've really gone the other direction, got a lot more pragmatic, and basically just said, look, just fundamentally, this is a really good media product. Let's just put great screens in the right parts of the store, and that alone is really valuable. And so that's what we've leaned into and focused on.
What's the pitch on the demand side that gets people interested today? Is it dwell time? Is it reach? I think what's fascinating is, as we think about in-store media, A, it's not well defined yet.
Yeah.
And B, you're doing it from the perspective of, most traditional retail media is the retailer selling it. You're a network model, and you are the one selling it. So what is the pitch that's working today, getting brands and other marketers interested in advertising in store?
So I'll answer your question, but just on the last bit you said, we do a little of both. So sometimes the retailer's selling, sometimes we're selling, especially the larger retailers. Some of our more recent partnerships you may have heard about, like Hy-Vee, for example. They're here at ShopTalk. They've got a great RMN team. They're selling in-store inventory as well, and we're just really trying to help them power that capability. But then, we also can include them as a part of a national network of 120 retailers across the country, and we can turn around and sell that nationally to brand advertisers. The pitch is going to change a little bit depending on who the brand is and what their objectives are. But the thing that's always true is it's an incredible audience. And it's an audience that's really receptive to marketing messaging. People are coming into the store in a buying mindset. They're not trying to be entertained or distracted. Like, they're there to buy stuff. And they're generally open to discovering new things. So when you have marketing content in store, advertising campaigns that are running, like, they actually are open to seeing it, and the engagement rates are higher than what you would typically expect on other media channels. And then, yeah, from a scale standpoint, even our network today, which is only about 25-30% of U.S. grocery, we're reaching 1 in 4, coming up on 1 in 3 Americans, so almost 100 million people across the U.S., all 50 states. It's this like incredible reach you can get that's harder and harder to find today as media channels get more and more fragmented. There's also other things too, like, if you're a programmatic video buyer, you're used to ad fraud made for advertising websites. You're used to things that people just don't even pay attention to, the kind of the ad blinders on online. It's very different for in-store when you run that same video creative. It's 100% viewable. It's contextually relevant. It's brand safe. There's just a lot of really positive qualities on that front too.
To keep going with the pitch, yes, it's brand safe, and it's the lowest funnel you could be. You're right at the shelf, or you're at the... Actually, let's talk about that. Where are these digital signs?
So typically, when a retailer starts out, they're doing some of the key areas of the store. So they're going to do entrance. A lot of retailers have like print signage at entrance, like an Iron Man stand that's there that they have to slide paper into every week. And that's an easy...
I love the names of all these things.
Yeah.
The Iron Man.
Yeah, I didn't make this up. And it's very easy for them to swap that out with a digital screen. We have literally what we call a digital Iron Man, and that's just an easy change to make. It fits in really well. It reaches every shopper. So that's an area that we see a lot of retailers leaning into. Then on the other end of the spectrum at checkout, it's an area where you already have a lot of marketing messaging there. It's really high dwell time. Everybody's got to go through it. And it's also because of the way that we do the setup and checkout, everybody can see it mid-journey too when they're going up and down the aisles. So those are like probably the two most common. A lot of retailers that have pharmacies in store are starting to roll screens out there. And then I think more and more we're going to see this year end caps, service departments, more category-specific placements.
I think you talked about with Hy-Vee, they're all over the store.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the front. What did you call the checkouts? The front end?
Yeah, that's the retail term, but yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So if it's not there, you basically are able to say 100% of people going in and out of the store. How do you measure the rest of it?
There's different ways to do it. You can do the really sophisticated stuff like we used to do at the start of our company, where you're literally using image data, or you're maybe tracking device IDs in store. There's a million different ways you could do it. The simple reality is most brands, like, they just want to know that they're being seen, and they want to have at an aggregate level an understanding of what's happening. And so you can do studies that basically tell you, like, X% of shoppers are going to go to this zone in the store, and Y% are going to go to that zone. And so there's like industry benchmarks that you can leverage for that if you just want to do it at scale. But it's, again, going to depend on the objectives.
How much are brands interested in like device ID matching and checking? Like, traditionally, retail media is a big driver driven by the ability to identify shoppers and transactions and attribution. And obviously, if it's in store, it typically requires some sort of device ID matching. Is that something you've seen a lot of demand for, or is that more talk than
I think that's
reality?
more talk than reality. There's a lot of pilots going on, but I've not seen anything at scale or in production. And I think it's kind of missing the point. In-store is valuable because you have all of these transactions happening. It's 85-90% of the transactions for a retailer happening in their in-store environment. You have all those credit cards, you have all those transaction logs of what they bought. And so that's all you need. If you want to know that they went specifically by this one screen in the cooler aisle, then yeah, you got to get a little more sophisticated. But if you just want to know, like, at an aggregate level, what was the impact of a campaign, like, you already have the valuable thing. It's the transaction logs. And the thing that's a little bit interesting to me is that data is being used to power offsite media right now. And I've always felt like that's a little bit interesting. It seems like it would make a lot more sense.
Be honest. Interesting?
I don't know that everybody's thrilled about it. And I think that there's definitely great use cases for it. But if you just, in a simple-minded way, step back and say, okay, for on-site retail media, I'm going to look at the performance online for the campaigns I run there, and that's why it's exciting. Why would you not do the same thing for in-store? Run a campaign in-store, look at the performance from a sales standpoint.
Are you seeing, as it seems like your point of, hey, stop doing offsite when you can do in-store, is that pitch getting some receptivity as you start doing it? Hey, we know they're there, and why don't you carve out some of those dollars from offsite into in-store?
Ultimately, that's the retailer's call, right? I'm not going to tell them how to make those sort of strategic decisions, but I do think it's a win for everybody.
It's okay in this podcast to make that, to pick that push.
Make some strategic decisions.
You can lead into it here. It's okay.
Look at it from this perspective. Is anybody really that happy about offsite retail media? Like, from a retailer perspective, the margins are not always that great because it's not their inventory they're selling. They're reselling other people's stuff. From a brand perspective, like, they could buy that elsewhere. The main value is really the retail data. It's not the inventory that's valuable. And I do think it's a fair question to ask, like, why would you not be doing that in an in-store environment and just matching it up with the in-store sales.
Andrew Lipschman has talked a lot about in-store as the most undervalued component of retail media.
Yeah.
And it drives much higher attribution than almost any other of the types of retail media. And he's shocked that there's not more being done there. And I think that's kind of your point of saying, hey, it's okay. Like, people, you have shoppers, you have purchases. Like, why aren't you just putting yourself in front of the purchaser at that point in time?
Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense.
I think there's also just this false assumption that people go into a store knowing exactly what they're going to buy, and like the decision's already made at that point. No data will tell you that. People go in and a ton of the stuff on their list, some of the stuff they end up buying was not on their list going to the store. But most people don't even have a shopping list when they go in, and so they're very receptive to changing behavior. There's also just a lot of cases where you can do upper and mid-funnel marketing, that it's not going to change behavior on that trip, but it will maybe the next one or the following. And so I always just look at this as it's an audience that you can get in front of in a really impactful way.
Well, Costco talks about their in-store environment as it's a treasure hunt, to exactly your point, right? They want people to come and explore, and they come in, it's the classic, you come in to buy a $20 thing at Costco and you walk out with $400 shopping cart. That's kind of their goal, and I think you're speaking to that as that's more common. Also, I think one of the things you're getting into is retail is becoming more experiential.
Yep.
And beyond just the purchase of, I'm going to play with products, I'm going to experience products, I'm using that, digital shelves only do so much, and in-store solves a much better use case in terms of experience. I wonder, is it a build-out question for retailers? Is it how do you make it a consistent part of the experience?
Yep.
Talk through how you get retailers to adopt this. Is it a CapEx problem? Is it a retail experience problem? We get it. We're big fans. We love the idea of where in-store is going and are shocked. Tom's talked about this for a couple of years now as what gets him most excited about retail media, given his
And what
experience with
gets
Grocery.
Todd most frustrated with me is
Well, no, I'm not frustrated at all. I think I totally
focus
get it.
on
Right? This is-
electronic shelf labels and geeking out on putting promotions in front of people. But to your point, like with offsite, you're making sure that you find that person that you already know, which may or may not be the right idea. In store, just like on site, you don't need to target the hell out of people because they're there to shop. Tell us about your perspective on this.
Gosh, where do I start? You were asking what makes it hard. Why is it not becoming?
Why is it
a
not
thing?
faster, bigger, whatever? What's holding retailers back from really going gong show in this area?
The thing I have experience in is software and technology, right? And it's just a hell of a lot easier to make changes to your website than a physical store.
Right.
For on-site retail media, it was built out very quickly because it was code you could drop into your site, and there were a lot of good options. And it's not rocket science to put a banner out on a website. We've been doing that for a while. And this is very different. You've got to get physical hardware into the stores. You've got to do it in the right way. You got to make sure you don't blow out your CapEx budget, which a lot of people do. And for the RMN teams that are at retailers, they haven't really had to ask for a ton of permission for on-site retail media. But for the stores, like, that's a sacred place. The people operating those stores, the people on the merchandising side, their biggest nightmare is that these folks that are incentivized to generate revenue are going to come in and just turn their stores into Times Square. And there are examples of people doing that. There are companies that have tried to put literal pop-up ads in front of you, right, where you can't see the product. You have to watch the ad first.
Oh, yes, cooler screens, of course.
I didn't name them, but so I think that is a real fear that a lot of merchants and like store operations folks have. And so you've got to start first talking to them and saying, okay, what would it look like to have parts of your store be more digital? And so we always just do a store walk with them involved and say, let's just look at all the print stuff you have. Like, do you enjoy swapping out these things every week?
And today, we talked with a retailer, head of retail media, and there was an opportunity to replace those print labels or signs, and they did the whole math and figured out just the cost savings and the operational savings of replacing those and printing those out, and doing that would justify the program, but they couldn't get the head of store operations, the exec team behind it, because they didn't want to muck with the experience. They don't want to change what customers have been used to for 20 years, even if it was a better.
Yeah,
So
it seems like it seems like the excuses are either it's too small, or
Being dollars is too small.
like it's too small in terms of dollars, or I don't even know why the labor cost thing doesn't solve it for them. But
Yeah, you've got CapEx issues for sure. I've seen a lot of retailers that try to do this on their own, and they end up spending 3 to 4x what we do when we build out an equivalent program. And like right from the start, it's a pretty hard program to make the unit economics work.
Yep.
There's also just, like you're saying, buy-in across the organization. It's hard to do that, and the bigger the company is, the more people you got to have on board. And then, it's a two-sided marketplace. You got to have the supply and you got to have the demand. And we're not at the scale yet where that demand is obvious. We've got coming up on 6,500 stores in our network, which is huge in a way. The tier one retailers don't really have any in-store media to speak of.
Yeah, let's talk about, as we get towards the end of this, I'd love to hear about your plans. How are you taking budget away from out of home? How are you connecting to the programmatic world? What can you tell us about where it's going?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly get some budget from the out of home world, but we've largely tried to pivot more and more away from that, just because if you think about it, out of home buyers and budgets are really set up for billboards. Like they're about these large format perms that they buy, the same thing they've bought for the last 20 years. They might have another 10 or 20%, maybe, that they can put towards more interesting things or whatever they want to call it. So there's money there, but it's tiny. Where we're more interested is really the programmatic video space, because if you think about comparing in-store video or in-store retail media to what they're buying today for programmatic video teams, it just compares really favorably. And their budgets are a lot more fluid. They're always looking to try new things that can increase incremental reach or be more efficient from a cost standpoint, or just meet the objectives of their client. So I think that's where really the budgets are going to shift. Andrew Lipsman and I actually debate this a lot. He's big on this is the new TV, and I think there's some truth to that. There's certainly a lot of shifts happening with linear TV, but I think where there's the most potential is the programmatic video side of things, because it's really not hard to get started on that. You just need the brands to be bought into it.
I wouldn't have thought that programmatic video would have extend to in-store, so it's interesting you're talking about that as an opportunity of maybe the crossover, like the leakage into the world, and as people get more experience with it, then they'll invest more and understand it more. So that's interesting. Where do you see in-store in 5 years or 10 years? And what is it? You're going to see every retailer is going to have multiple screens, and it's going to be, is it primarily video? Is it primarily quote unquote display or image-based advertising? What is the future in your mind, or as you guys see it at GroceryTV?
I'll give you the 1 year and build out to that. Like we feel very confident by the end of this year, the majority of tier 2 retailers on down will have some kind of in-store media network. The slowest ones to move are the tier 1s, because it's just they have even more of these internal challenges that we talked about. So I don't know if any of the tier 1s will go this year. Certainly hope they do, but it's probably going to be more of a next year thing. But even just with the tier 2s on down, you're talking about you can reach 1 in 2 Americans, basically. So that's huge and pretty high density in every market. So I think that's going to be really exciting. I think that's going to start to lead to a lot of demand that's coming into the market to match that supply. And then 2 to 3 years out, I think every retailer will be doing it in some capacity. I don't think it's going to be an earth-shattering thing. I think most shoppers won't even maybe notice. Like, it's just the print stuff turned digital and the life continues. But from a demand side, I think it's going to be a huge opportunity, because folks that have these really large programmatic video budgets, that a good chunk of that was not spent very efficiently before, can now start to shift into this category and get a lot more for their dollar, which is also a win for the retailers, because it's like truly incremental dollars that they didn't have access to before.
So yeah, it's also, we had Dave Johnson, who's CEO of Thrasio now, on, and he was talking about his old P&G experience, about how the packaging that these brands have needs to change. It needs to work so hard if there is no digital signage.
Yep.
It would be interesting to see how you work with those brands, to see, are you at the point with the brands where you're actually consulting with them to get to the point of what they should be doing in the store?
It depends on the brand. Some of them are more forward than others. But yeah, we talk a lot about what does best-in-class in-store retail media look like, especially from a creative standpoint, but also from a measurement standpoint, all that kind of stuff. But no, I think like it's in some ways like not that complicated. You think about where social media was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now it's just very normal to have like social video and to run creatives on a social platform. And I don't think it's going to be really any different for the retail space. You're just going to have video running in-store, video running on-site, and being able to deliver those messages that are either top or mid-funnel if you're trying to just hit the objectives associated with that, or if it's more bottom of funnel, that could also work, because it's obviously an in-store environment. But it's
like the Thanos line, "I am inevitable." That comes to my mind. You can have you as Thanos in that regard. You mentioned best in class. Like, who do you think the best in class advertiser for in-store today? Who's the one you always like to point to? Oh my God, they really get it and do an awesome job with it.
Oh man, I don't want to get myself in trouble on that one.
You can fine. Who are some of your favorites? Like, and campaigns that are obviously run within GroceryTV are perfectly fine. What are the ones you guys look at and go, God, they're our favorite customers?
Yeah, I think anybody that's doing custom creative that speaks to the environment, speaks to the context, we see that in the data that shoppers respond well to it and are excited about it. I saw one that was this is actually a little while ago, but it sticks with me. It was a deodorant brand, and this was running at the checkout aisle. And they said, hey, do 10 calf raises while you're waiting in line. And it's a funny image to think of, like, people standing in line doing calf raises. but it works. And then you're looking around, seeing people do this, and you associate with the brand, and it's fun. And I just think what's cool about this environment is it's going back to basics a little bit when it comes to advertising. It's just have good creative that speaks to people in an honest way. You're not trying to like hack people's brains here or trick them or anything. It's literally just you're reaching them at a time when they're receptive, when they're in a buying mindset, and
just your friendly neighborhood grocer.
Yeah. And who's the retailer that you look at as your showcase or implementation? Like
I don't want to pick favorites. We have so many great
one to ones that maybe you call it ones you like.
But I think you brought up Hy-Vee. I think what they do that's very different is most folks that have gotten into store retail media, they've got one or two zones that they're trying right now. Hy-Vee, it's a full store experience. Now, in some ways, being on the bleeding edge can be tough, but it's also cool because they're getting to learn all kinds of stuff that other people just can't test in the real world right now. So that's pretty cool. But there's a ton of other great retailers we partner with that I think are executing in a cool way in terms of how they integrate in store with their RMN.
Yeah, no, I think that the point is, like, for our listeners and people who follow us, they're going to want to go into a store and see. That's why I want to bring it up. What should I go? And I think that's what we want to tell our listeners to do is they need to experience this. I do think it's inevitable. And I do think this is going to be one of the biggest waves of retail media over the next 5 years is in store. So I want the people in our industry to start looking around and paying attention to, everyone should go look at Hy-Vee and look what they're doing.
Yeah, and if you're on the East Coast, we've partnered with ShopRite for a long time, like Wakefern. They're great. They've got a ton of different formats that they've been experimenting with, and Giant Eagle just rolled out with us. They've got some really great stuff they're doing. Any part of the country right now, go look on our website, look at the map. You can see who's closest to you.
Yeah, you have some good examples on there.
Yeah.
Wanted to thank you for being on the podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your shop talk, and thanks for being with us on The Middlemen.
Appreciate it.